It seems that a large fraction of the United States population is both apolitical and convinced that capitalism means it's okay to make huge amounts of money, no matter how, including the buying of political protection. So they act against their own best interests. Any suggestions for how to get people politically active to take back the power they have?
There have been societies that have struggled with this. We haven't suffered enough yet for that. I mean, Germany after World War II, for example, was devastated. I mean, they simply said, we're going to have television, and television is going to be for public service. That's all it's going to be. I mean, we'll have 1 hour at night when we have entertainment, and the rest is going to be political discussion, and it's off at 11 o'clock. That kind of worked. We're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. But maybe, you know, after we suffer enough, none of us know the answer to that. But when you have a fair number of people showing up, the strong argument is know your information. Read Piketty's book. Have stuff in mind. Be able to answer questions and say, you know, actually that's not true. Which we wish we would get a little bit more from our so-called news service instead of the yes and no, these 2 points of view. You say, well, wait a minute, have the narrator take sides. But I think we're sort of stuck for the time being. But we're going to suffer more. The answer, frankly, is once you start suffering, you get more serious about it. Right now, we are suffering. The middle class is suffering. The working class is suffering. Seriously. But we're still buying the notion that we'll just get back to normal economic growth soon. Obama won't do it, so the next person will do it. It ain't going to happen. And once that sort of sinks in and we realize we're in a new reality, maybe we sort of wake up. And this stuff does take time. So I think America, if you just go back to the Norton-Arley study, where the intuition of Americans for a more ideal society is really sort of heartwarming. You say, geez, that's a lot of good stuff to build on. But we've probably got to suffer a bit more first.
Ready?
A bad answer, huh?
If you have a global wealth tax, who collects the money? Who gets the money? Who decides how to spend the money?
That's exactly the right question. So what's Piketty want people to do? First ask the question and then discuss it. And so no one knows the answer to that. But if you have serious discussions about those things, you start sorting it out. And what makes sense sort of rises to the fore, and what doesn't make sense sort of drifts away. You try it in a smaller arrangement, maybe Europe, maybe, I don't know, Singapore, I don't know. And you sort of, it's like what Europe is doing with the euro. I mean, is it working perfectly? No, but the alternatives, if anyone knows about the causes of World War I, World War II, are much, much worse. At least Europe has not had another war. I mean, the retort is, that's exactly Piketty's point. Discuss it. What would make sense?
By restricting immigration in this country, are we directly or indirectly affecting growth?
Yeah. No, the reason we're having economic growth and Europe is not, or at least our economic growth is better, is almost purely demographic. I mean, our productivity rates and their productivity rates per capita are the same. It's simply, we're growing with population. They're not. And consequently, we get economic growth. Now you say, yeah, we're getting economic growth, but we have these people we don't want. Well, let's see. Didn't we say that for Italians, and didn't we say that for others? Haven't we said that multiple times? But the eventual benefit was, I mean, San Francisco's anti-Asian laws in the first half of the century, first part of the century, were nauseating, and yet. Boy, yeah, the answer is you benefit from immigration, economically.
Can you explain specifically how inequality leads to war?
People that have no dignity don't just sit there and seethe. They act. And the first actions are always random and chaotic, and they don't seem, what's this random violence all about? But eventually that violence becomes organized. It gets organized by ideologies, whether it's liberty, equality, fraternity like the French, or land-bred peace like the Russians, or Deutschland, Deutschland über alles, or our God is great. Eventually, that frustration that goes on for generations becomes organized. People just don't lie down and say, oh, I'm a loser and I'll die. So that the other, it just doesn't happen that way. The history's pretty clear on this.
Isn't it about time we start talking about implementing a personal monetary wealth cap? Who needs to be a billionaire when those resources could be redirected toward making sure everyone can live a good life?
Piketty is disturbed by the superstar status and goes at length saying there's no justification for it. I mean, the talent that the people making enormous amounts of money have versus the people just below them, there's no difference. There's nothing, there's really not much there in terms of justification, in terms of rational economic decision making. But he's not willing to say anywhere in his 700 pages that he wants to cap wealth. He would like to tax it, however. He does say, by the way, that the current level of taxation that we have is probably about the limit. And he says, we're not going to get more taxes out of the current taxes we have. We need another tax on top of it. That's his argument. Cap on it, he's resistant. Piketty's resistant to that, and don't ask me.
If the pitchforks are coming, why are the privileged working so hard to solidify their position? It seems more realistic to take the Buffett-Gates path of not trying to take it with you.
Well, I think there are people out there, and we just, and any of you that just had the chance and chose to watch the Ken Burns series on the Roosevelts, very wealthy family. I mean, there are always families out there that are working in that direction. Right now, they're not getting a voice, but it happens. I mean, this is an ugly lesson. I'm not going to do it. It's such a negative note. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. Yes, I am, because it's a tease. I mean, how does Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt, this great president that does the progressive era and is lionized at the time, we've sort of forgotten about him, how does he become president? McKinley's shot. McKinley's shot. He has been, the intention of the rich was to bury him because he was such a pain, make him vice president and get that darn progressive out of our hair. It'll end his career. And McKinley is shot dead and he becomes president. What gets us to the Civil Rights Act? Kennedy's shot. I mean, these are wrenching lessons. You say, and Piketty say, you can't go there. This is not good. Have discussions. I mean, if it's hopeless, just keep trying. It eventually gets there. All right, well, I guess we're done.
Okay, so before Ramsay answers one final question, we just want to thank you for coming and spending your Tuesday night with us. This has been really, really exciting. And poor Carol Woods has this really difficult task of making a choice between all
these great questions, you know.
Last one. Why is Piketty been attacked so vigorously?
Well, this is pretty self-evident, yeah. Pretty self-evident. And it may be effective. It may be effective. There may be so much negative out there that they'll say, oh, well, it's just another leftist rant, even though he is incredibly protective. But we talked about this at length. He's incredibly careful about not saying anything that would really give rise to he's another leftist kind of guy. But if that's where the power be, so be it. I mean, that's where it was in the Gilded Age. But the Gilded Age ended. And Roosevelt did come into power, and you did get the progressive age. And we did have an income tax before World War I, and we were on the march to cleaning up the meat industry and so forth. I mean, we are a decent people. We just get distracted.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for coming.